Good evening, one and all. We are into our next session, the final session of day one of Pharma Leadership Summit, and it's a very important session. As I said, we are dealing with one after the other the pharma segments, topics, main topics, and now we have a very important panel discussion before us. Why data integrity is a silver bullet for pharma, and we have eminent panelists. Two of them are international speakers, so happy to welcome all the panelists over here. And I would like to quickly introduce them. We have Mr. Khalilur Rahman, Global Head Software Testing Novartis, who will be the session chair for the panel. And we have Mr.
Hello.
Jitendra Mishra, VP Group CIO, Almavic Pharmaceutical Limited. Welcome, Mr. Mishra. We have Mr. Shriji Gopinathan, Global CIO of Lupin, who has joined in. And we have Mr. Ken, the Senior Director of IT Gilead Sciences. Welcome, sir. And we have Mr. Michael Hampton, Vice President, IDBS, who's joined us. Over to you, Mr. Rahman, for the session, sir.
Okay, thanks a lot, Pratibha. A warm welcome to everyone participating in this event, and it is a great privilege to host this eminent panel of speakers. So we'll get straight into the session. We shall be discussing, like Pratibha mentioned, on the data integrity, and we shall be looking at various challenges that are attributed to data integrity, and we'll be covering various niche topic, such as why data integrity is important, different types of data integrity testing and validation methods, how to deal with data integrity with the new age technologies, including big data, advanced analytic AI, ML, and so on, and how new technologies such as blockchain can help. That those are the themes that we've chosen. So without further ado, let us start the session. Right. I shall start this first question to Mike. Probably Mike, if you, as you're aware, data integrity is not a novel concept, and it's a guideline that has been around for ages, ever since FDA was set up. Organizations have been meeting up the data integrity requirements, even using paper-based as a system, albeit in a very tedious fashion. My question to you to start the session is, can technology be the enabler and lift the data integrity burden off the shoulders of the researchers? And also, can you let us know how integrating technologies with well-controlled data ontology and methods can be the right strategy to address this challenge? Over to you, Mike.
Great. Thank you for the question, and thank you for moderating the panel. It's also an honor to be on this panel with such accomplished leaders this afternoon. So I think the answer to that is yes. I think technology, we've seen that can be an enabler to free researchers from the classic burden of data integrity that we find in paper-based environments. But I think as we unpick that, there's really two key topics to discuss. And the first, it starts with a cohesive plan for your organization. How technology fits into that data integrity plan really should match your aspiration of how fast and how far you want to go with that change. So, unpicking that for a moment, do you expect to remove all paper from the laboratory? What are the implications of that for your organization? Do you expect to integrate instrumentation so that you remove all of those error transcription events that occur? Speaking of ontology, do you have a master data and ontology plan in your organization so that you understand how that can underpin a strong data integrity plan? Will you be templatizing your science, developing methods and SOPs in this technology, and therefore, building a very solid base of integrity and traceability in your data as it flows through your operations? Are you expecting to aspire to achieve something like audit by exception, where you virtually eliminate QA burden in your company because you've put the enforcement and flagging of that at the point of collection and experimentation? So everything I've just discussed is achievable and has been done, but I think all of them come with their own level of activation energy. And so it's important that as you plan out your path to invoke technology to help in this data integrity problem, that you've thought that through and really the implications of how far you want it to go. The second point I'll bring up quickly on that is that as you're going through this application of technology to help solve this problem, it's a great time to consider the additional advantages of that approach and how that can facilitate innovation in your organization. Having that end in mind as you go about that process can be really impactful to your firm, because you can drive downstream benefits, such as if you do many of the things that were just mentioned, you'll be at the endpoint that all of a sudden you can increase the speed of the decision making that your organization takes on, because you have access to a high fidelity, contextualized digital data set that you didn't before. And I think that's where I've seen, in particular, a lot of additional tangential business impacts, and solving more than just the problem of data integrity, but by solving that problem with technology, you open up a lot of additional innovation and speed in your business. So I think overall, I'd say the answer is yes. I think it comes down to how fast and how far do you plan to go? Do you have a plan to do that? And make sure that you consider the additional business benefits you can achieve as part of that application of technology to solve your data integrity challenges.
Thanks for that, Mike. That's a great start. So I'll move on the next panelist, who's a practitioner. So my question to Ken is on CSE 21 CFR and GXP. Ken, when it comes to data integrity, what testing methods or best practices can be used during operational qualification and installation qualification? My questions to you are, from a data integrity point of view, we have a good number of principles, right, and guidelines and recommendations such as ALCOA plus by FDA 21 parts CFR 11, and also MHR data integrity guidelines, and other leading regulatory organizations are also coming up with it, with new frameworks that we can adopt. As a practitioner, in which order would you prioritize them, right? And can you also mention why, while touching upon the importance of data integrity for operational qualification and installation qualification? Sorry, Ken, we couldn't hear you. Sorry.
No worries, I put myself on mute. So first off, my echo support, hearing everything that's going on in India, and I know it's a trying time, but you are a very strong country, and I'm very confident that you'll get through this. I have a large team in Chennai especially, so I'm watching very closely, and my heart is with you. To Elets, and thank you for inviting. I'm very honored to be here. So now to the question. It's a interesting thing. What I tell people, right, there are no shortcuts. If you are looking for like a template, all you're going to do is apply a template and a plan. Right? What you need to do in the system is actually look, what is the best practices? The best practice is to look at the intent of an IQ, an intent of an OQ, in the context of your business process. Right? What's up? Let me go at the extreme ends. If you're a clinical trial, anything in GCP, you've got to get a system up in place in weeks. Versus, on the GMP side, we're talking in months. So if you try to apply the same framework and this idea, so now when you overlay data integrity is just another set of requirements. It's just another set of expectations. And then in that, you need to look at the context of your system in place and then tailor your processes around it. So my best advice that I give everyone is don't try to apply like a template or a guide. Your best practice is to look at it from the context of the principles. So that kind of leads into your second part of your question, right? You talked about ALCOA. This is almost like a conversation whether you like Pepsi or Coke. ALCOA Plus is better, unlike New Coke, ALCOA Plus is better than ALCOA. So it moves on in the process, but there, when you're talking about ALCOA, right, that's a foundational concept, right? When you start looking at whether something has those attributes, right, whether it's accurate, whether it's legible, right, enduring, all the way through. You're looking at just kind of as the baseline. And then you start going above, and then you can differ, right? And it's not just FDA, like Part 11. You've got the, Part 11 gives you a framework for expectations for using the records, which all go back to data integrity themes, right? Because you're trying to ensure that the data is actually trustworthy throughout its life cycle, that there's no silent, corruption occurring, that you can retrieve it. And then here, the level above that, then you have, well, the level adjacent to that, not above, is you go to the MHRA guidance, right? So you have Part 11, you have the FDA's data integrity and CGMP, Q&A guide, which will go into more detail specifics, but that's just giving you a little more guidance and things to focus on. You have the MHRA, right? Data integrity guide. That is there, but in the context of my question, which is validation, those will both point, right? So if you look at Part 11, it defers validation externally. Much like the MHRA document, it defers validation questions to Annex 11 for computerized systems, Annex 15 for the larger systems and equipment. So they layer, so I'll go at the bottom, then you have to go up a layer, but each one of those is going to defer. The biggest thing about this, going back to the first part of the question on the guidance, what we should be doing is, like, our sector defines standards and expectations for us. How you achieve those, you go to the larger audits, you go to financials, you go to other sectors who have been doing this for much longer, have been focused on this. And they have tremendously large systems, and you take the best practices. You look and you apply, and then you bring it back in. So my guidance is then ultimately is to stand on the shoulders of other sectors. If we really look at validation, validation is built on principles from the 90s in software engineering. They actually were based on principles that are older. We have not moved forward, largely because they have to be broad enough such that they can be used for the extremes. Someone who does something in weeks, someone who does something in months. It's when you blindly apply it, you take something that's designed for something that's done in months to something that needs to be done in weeks, that you get something that doesn't scale. So my guidance is to trust yourself. You know what you're doing, you know your business, you have to build a system within those frameworks and those contexts. Understand the foundations, you understand Alcoa, you go above that, you look at the guidance, depending, again, Pepsi or Coke, whichever way you want to go, they'll each point to subsequent documents, and you can even mix them together, and if you want, like the kids do. And with that, I'll exit with that point. And again, my heart is with the country, and I'm looking to you to lead us out.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ken, for that intro, and appreciate. And also, Gilead plays a major role with some of the medications that are being given out. So, thanks for that. So, I'll probably take points from you and Mike, and segue into the next question. This is for Mr. Sriji. The question is, taking the strategy and framework and guidelines related point made by Mike and the actual practitioner challenges, put forth by Ken. If we segue into the new age technology such as AI, ML, big data analytics, right? And it opens a new paradigm. So, in your opinion, what is the impact of all these new technologies, AI, ML, big data, on data integrity and the various processes that are managed in the pharma industry and domain?
Hi, thanks, Kalilur, for having me in the session, and for the question. I hope you can hear me. I'm in a place where probably the connectivity is not so good. I just found a little room to sit. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah. So, the advanced analytics that we're talking about, big data, and artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, is the new age technology that all of us in pharma and other sectors are now looking to leverage. In the past, we have all been talking about a lot of dashboarding and reporting, and now we've been talking about the power of data, and now these technologies are actually helping us to leverage the power of data. in real terms, right? It is no different to any sort of automation that we have done in the past, whether it is simple digitization or ERP implementation or whatever kind of automation work that we've done. I mean, Alcoa, the abbreviation that stands for what it means itself explains what is it that is being expected in any kind of situation, right? So we all know that in a normal scenario, even without the AI and ML, it is actually difficult to maintain data integrity because there is varied sources of data that we are using. It can be structured, it can be unstructured, it can be sensors, it can be IoT devices, it can be actual manually data being logged into some applications, it could be PDF that is being read, whatever. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the artificial intelligence and machine learning world, it goes up a notch or maybe a couple of notches in terms of the complexity of that traceability, accurateness, etc., that we are expected to deliver. So if you look at the fundamentals, which we are already practicing in pharma, there is no two ways about it, right? I mean, we have to be absolutely sure that the data that we use for all our operations, whether it is manufacturing, quality test, R&D, clinical trials, it has to be absolutely on the spot. If you apply those fundamental principles when you leverage AI and ML as well, I think you're good. You need to be able to trace it, where the source is. You need to be able to trace the outcomes of the algos that you write. You need to be able to look at how you're interpreting that, and if you're using any of the outcomes of the algos to go back and change any parameters or settings on a line or an instrument or a lab, then you better be sure that that outcome can be actually attributed to the real data and the algo logics that has been written. Okay, so this is fundamentals again, right? So I don't think we need to get overly worried about data integrity when it comes to AI and ML, as long as we are going to sticking to the fundamentals, and we are not going to write black boxes so that people don't understand after a while. So it's very important to create that transparency, that there is input data, which are the data sources, how are we transforming it, where are we storing it, how are we then using it for computing the algorithms, and then what are the outcomes. So I think if we can do that, I think we're good.
Okay, thanks for that point. Would anyone like to add any additional point, because it's a very broad point topic? So any points from anyone else? So probably I'll ask a question for Mr. Jitendra first, and then we'll get back. Coming to the advanced technologies, blockchain, whether it's a public, private, or hybrid, is also being evolving in the pharma industry, right? When it comes to data integrity, blockchain's concepts can be a good point to consider and implement if it's the right thing to do. So what is your opinion? Do you see a future for blockchain, whether it's private, public, or hybrid blockchain the companies may choose in the pharma industry as a tool to aid data integrity requirements across various processes?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, India time. I will start with saying that in God we trust. Rest bring the data. That's the situation we are. Specifically, when we talk about the healthcare industry, where the risk is very high for the treatment or a human or a drug discovery. So the integrity is something which is a key. And if we lost the key, we are out of the business. So that's the impact of a data integrity in a pharmaceutical. But similarly, other domain or other BFSI, or even for that matter, even a banking sector, integrity is one of the most important. Even integrity, when we talk on a personal note, then if you have no integrity between a husband and wife, there's no relation. So that's the severity of the integrity in a personalized or in a professional. So now how to ensure that we are integrated, because there is a B2B business, there is a B2C business, there are top of that the plethora of devices are connected to the business. Now how you remain be integrated? When we talk about the digitization, when we talk about the digital transformation, and as Srijit touched upon that ML, AI, which is coming to the business also, we'll have also a challenge as how we integrate that all these things. So we see that definitely the blockchain, which we have seen that blockchain, how it is instrumental for the Bitcoins, and it has been safely used. And we see that the growth of the blockchain from 2016 to till it has gone to the million and trillion. It is expanding like anything. The reason being that the blockchain is a technology which is uh, ledger written, which is on blocks, which is decentralized and having a timestamp, and the blocks are depend upon the previous and the past block. So any change in a block will actually trigger a workflow to have some action on that block. So the time and that top of that, when you talk about the blockchain, you cannot just keep your system in silos. So blockchain is going to be opportunity that where you can integrate your whole systems, whether it is a partner, because when we outsource our clinical trials or we do in-house clinical trials, or for that matter for the efficacy of that, or what we do with our regulatory authorities, at this point it is in silos. We do and we do the DMF, this all in silos. We generate the data, we keep the data. So if look into that, do to plug all the blocks, all the chains into the system, I think blockchain is the solution. And it is under the proof of concept. Many are exploring. If you look into that, some of the real use case as of now, the Bitcoins, which is being largely traded on your blockchain platform. Similarly, we have recently seen that in the US, they have done the conduct of your co-vaccine from your government to your public. So integrity of your co-vaccine, or integrity of your getting the feedback or the updates from the patient has to be integrated into the system. Then how you are going to ensure that any third party system or any system which is being put from any organization has got a trust? So what we have seen currently, I have read article from Ernst and Young and Deloitte that this study been conducted in the US very successfully, where we see that all the participation from the public, from the government, is being seamlessly been done without any integrity issue, because there are multiple stakes. Each patient or each community member is a stake. When we talk about that, there could be any issue in terms of your wrong information or any wrong update. While putting this infrastructure on blockchain will actually enable all the stakeholder, all the participants, that you are in a similar platform with the enablement of every block which is integrated from timestamp with your workflows, which is definitely there. There are way to go forward on a clinical, in a healthcare sector. But yeah, we see that the growth from the previous and the current, what we see the investment and loads are coming on a blockchain. Definitely it is tremendous. And in future, but there are a laboratory. If you look into that, how we are going to get, as of now, we see that we talk about that the private cloud or the hybrid cloud, even we are not able to do our ERP or a core solution on cloud because of the validation or the regulatory approvals. So blockchain definitely is a next leap, but certainly looking to that the current context and looking to the situation where the public and the government participants are very high, when your systems are very much fragmented, and when your ITOTs, when your operational technology or information technology is going to tie up, and actually you want to have a seamless data engine to be plugged with all sort of a data integrity, I think blockchain is the solution, which I understand. There are different offering in a blockchain. I have gone through that, some IBM, and we have advanced discussion with IBM also. So that's like your hybrid cloud and the private cloud. Similarly, blockchain has got similar mechanism where you have a private blockchain series, where you have to conduct a very high risk, like your drug discovery or maybe a clinical trial using the blockchain. But subject matter to the approval from the regulatories, as we see, until unless it is not been having a very proven use case in the market, whereas we see that there is a good adoption, it will be not possible for India context to jump on blockchain to conduct all the clinical trials or attaching your devices on a blockchain environment. Yes, the future is there. We see that huge investments are happening on a blockchain, and because it is a secure environment, it is an encrypted infrastructure. Looking to the current situation of the cyber threat, it is also a good solution where you can secure your data by way of encryption, having this infrastructure being provided. I think that's the point, which is very interesting for the future point of view.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, just taking the point I just made, and also the point made earlier on the AML, probably, Mike, this is a question for you. So, when it comes to data integrity and validation, if you take all the new technologies and the regulatory approvals we need to get, right? You just take advanced analytics like big data and digital solutions using these devices. They are typically tested before the release. So Ken would raise his hand, and as far as FDA and the regulatory agencies are concerned, you need to validate it, right? Testing, as we are. If you are just doing testing, does not mean they are validated. You need to validate them in order to be compliant, right? So, uh, and also currently there are no regulatory authority certified solution for testing and validation of big data or AML based systems. So the first question is, how do you tackle this problem, right? If you need to test too many scenarios and do all these things by hand, it becomes a big problem, right? Even algorithm, even it comes with a certain point of accuracy, but it's not 100%. But when real testing or validation, we go for 100%. So how do you hand test so many scenarios, right? And it becomes very complex. And also, how can the industry work together between various stakeholders, be it the suppliers or in achieving the overall joint ownership of system validation? This is just to the point which Ms. Jitendra made about blockchain possibly playing a role here. So classically, this has fallen off all and on for the pharma, and resource challenge is a big stifle that takes away resources from innovation. Is there a way we can address this situation, right? Because it's a complex cluster of challenges that we need to tackle.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Actually, to steal from Ken, we'll stand on the shoulders of others. And I heard so many relevant points in the previous three discussions because, one, the regulatory bodies are behind, right? They understand that. The conversations are there that technology's moved much faster than the updates to these requirements. So the great news is there's an acknowledgement that there needs to be a revisiting of that, particularly in the GLP area. But we all know regulatory change takes time. So I think I'd add to that triangle, both from industry, technology, and regulatory bodies, and it's how we continue to move together to have an open dialogue and discussion about how we can provide better opportunities to improve the speed to get therapies to patients and patient outcomes by working together to allow technology and innovation to get more to the front face of having impact. But there's another concept that Ken brought up, which I think, again, I'll steal, which was it's really about that intent and business purpose. And I think that's where I'm seeing the most dramatic shift right now in the comprehensive understanding of what am I deploying this piece of technology to do? And therefore, how can I take that into my concepts of how I apply a validation approach? So you're absolutely right that testing a piece of software is not equivalent to validation. And the disproportionate burden of that does fall on industry and pharma. But the good news is I am seeing some disruption there. I think when I think back when it started, it was probably when more wide adoption of risk-based approach was taken to validation processes. And what I mean by that is obviously risk and validation typically don't want to go hand in hand. But rather than just going through the classic paradigm of installation qualification, operational qualification, performance qualification, taking these long linear processes to make sure every step of every application did as it intended. really let's take a look at that intent and business purpose. Let's understand what is the scope and surface area that this technology or this application is going to affect. And then let's make sure that the outcomes, negative and positive boundary testing, all of that's done, but within the scope of that performance qualification. And I've seen working together between the technology providers and industry, understanding that scope, being able to skip and reprioritize resources that would classically go into operational qualification and move them into performance qualification. So I think that was one of the first major shifts I saw. Now, as technologies continue to move on, I think we're at the point now that we are seeing, SaaS technologies being able to further accelerate that that progression on the validation continuum. But the biggest change is that it removes a significant amount of the burden from industry. So you can have a SaaS provider that can now provide an IQ and OQ, prepared for validation system to industry, and industry is able to take that on, still have the responsibility to ensure they're happy. So the review, receipt, and approval of that validation is still the requirement, but it takes a significant amount of burden away. I think when you take that type of service and approach and now apply that with something like automated PQ, you're in a position where, again, you can push more and more burden onto the supplier and the technology provider, but in alignment with the plans that you've laid out as a business in how to reach those outcomes. And that's where I'm seeing a great acceleration of pace to get these systems validated. But I think the big aha moment that comes from this is that now, as you play that out, we know technology is moving very quickly. This allows you to look at systems and say, well, great, we validated this system. Let's not touch it for 5 years because we know we have to revalidate it. Because that burden's so dramatically reduced, you have that opportunity to say, great, I know innovation is moving really quick. I can bring that in to empower my scientists in a much more rapid and progressive fashion. And therefore, I don't need to be worried about that validation burden, because I know working with the technology provider, we can get to our endpoints much more quickly. And that's what excites me, because that impacts patients, that impacts getting therapies to market, and that has a real opportunity to exponentially improve the pace of discovery and innovation that we have going on.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So just to add on to that, I think if you're really looking at it, what will enable this is really, the CSA concepts, which is really talking about risk-based documentation, which is talking about leveraging work that is already done by your supplier, repeating it is of no value. Looking at what we say test and val being separate, but the val cycle can use what's done in the test cycle. I mean, that's one of the key principles of CSA, and we rely on it. And back to the intended use, maybe something I wasn't talking about, I should have talked about the larger, right? You have the data life cycle, and then you have the system life cycle underneath. Right. And there is to Mike's point, it's all about calibrating what you are doing, because if you take like some small application that has no real impact and you start mapping out everything to the nth degree, you waste your effort. To Shree's point, this is we're talking about static, like in the AI phase. We're not talking about dynamic AIs at this point in time. We're talking about static, which means that it's been trained, it's been tested, that algorithm is not going to, so you could test it. Right? We're not talking about the continually learning dynamic where you've got to go back and constantly test. There are no medical devices in that space yet, and that's a whole different area. But for our place, it is a confined area where we can apply the principles and practices. On the big data front, there are, you have to look at about the ingesting, the processing, right, of the data, the retrieval of the data, and the reporting of the data. These are all things they're states we already know. And if you want, and again, this is where we stand on the shoulders of us. You go out and look at other sources, how to test big data. You'll find lots of industry. We're not unique. Don't reinvent the wheel. Pull those in. And then my guidance is then it would be look at concepts such as CSA, and then apply and tailor your processes. And it's much to Mike's point, CSA is nothing more than risk-based documentation, risk on top of risk-based testing that's kind of combined and optimized. And I guess To my earlier question, GAMP has got some great resources on data integrity. And again, the data integrity by design document's got a great section on CSA. So
Sure.
that would be my guidance.
Sure. Thanks, Ken. And that's great, great to hear about CSA and the guidance. So probably I'll go to one open generic question. There is an article from PDA. They publish a report, that up to 80% of the data integrity breaches are unintentional, and they occur largely due to either a performance or a business pressure that people follow and do. And second could be lack of awareness or capability in the team. Sometimes you may have a revolving door in terms of team. Third one is data integrity not getting integrated or inculcated into the actual organizational or team culture responsible for it. And the last one is inadequate processes or technologies. Pretty much all of them, or all these recommendations are low hanging fruit. So what would be your recommendation in the current digitally transformed environment? It's an open question for all the panelists.
I could give it a go.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we call it a low hanging fruit, but sometimes we find that these things are not so low hanging, because it's just like any situation. Uh, People are the smartest, and people are the weakest link in the ecosystem, right? So, however good process that you create, if we do not have one simple to handle, not so complex processes, that is put in place. Second, as you said, the awareness and the importance of why it needs to be followed through. Yeah. And then third is potential consequences that the individual as well as the company might face if the right processes are not followed from an integrity point of view. But as I said, in any scenario, whether it's a process adherence or whether it is a cyber security related, how much of a technology you put in place, how much of a process you put in place, if people awareness, people education, and action and the intent from the people are not there, then we are at risk. So this is a continuous journey. I don't think there is a magic pill answer to this. It is actually a low hanging fruit when you think about it, but you have to keep pushing that trunk down as frequent as possible so that you can pluck the fruit. You can make it easy for the people to pluck the fruit without so difficulty. Yeah, I mean, so training programs, communication, uh, uh, talking about failures openly so that people really understand what has happened, and what is the consequence that we have suffered. All those softer aspects is what is needed on top of simple, easy to understand, easy to execute processes and technology platforms.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Suji. Anyone else? Mr.
Um,
Jitendra?
yeah, I think everyone is looking the fruit at the top. Nobody looks at the hanging fruit, which are very, very vital and which are easily doable. I think which are easily doable. Everybody look at top for the digital transformation or maybe IT/OT conversion and all. But the basic thumb rule is that how your process has been defined, how the standard been charted out, something which is a very fundamental, as the previous panelists talk about, that your processes, your awareness, your education, and look into the other data life cycle, how the data being stored, captured, maintained. So entire life cycle of data need to be defined, well defined, when it comes to any integration for that matter, whether it is a ERP or whether it is a SAP. For that, we say that is a GXP application. So what is your segregation of duty? What is your access control? What is the retention period of that? So these are the thumb rules, and which has been governed by your very well defined documents. For that matter, everybody need to look into that what can go wrong, and there has to be a certain guideline and a continuous awareness and education for that matter, because these are very simple, as we always say, as a low hanging, but the problem comes from the low hanging fruits only. So the education, awareness, the well defined processes, governance, reviews, for that matter, reviews, internal reviews, and some internal mechanism by way of putting some software where you can achieve some of your governance. Like in financial systems, you have some governance tools. Similarly, what are the governance tools when you talk about the GMP applications or a GXP applications? There are certain tools where you can achieve the compliances. These are the things which are very important, and this is a continuous journey. It's not that something we achieved. It is all the time is education, but we should not repeat the problems. That is something which is education. If anything goes wrong, definitely as a human, we definitely fall into some traps, but it should not get repeated. That's something which is a thumb rule. And remaining is that the continuous learning, no doubt about that. Education plays a very vital role for in that environment. Process is standard. I work for almost 20 years in GlaxoSmithKline and see how the process been well defined, even taking access to the systems. So very clear fundamentals, very clear defined well processes. So you are governed with the processes rather than incremental approaches. So all the processes has been done, hire to retire, what type of a data you are going to play, what critical it is, what type of a network you need to be provided. So many things are falling into that area when we talk about any GMP or a GXP environment. But we need to look into that, and there has to be, my saying is that there has to be a well-defined document processes and being followed. It's not that when we talk about that in place, in use, it should not be in place only. It should be in place, in use.
Okay.
Just to add on to
Sure,
everything, I agree with everything that's being said. The point I want to make, it's very difficult to idiot-proof a system. You have to acknowledge, right? Because that first part was talking about the human aspect of it. You have to look at the risk. I'll tell you the first. I grew up in GMP manufacturing. Part 11 rolled out. First thing that happened is people started barcoding their passwords and their logins. Click, click. As they toss their badge. Hey, verify here. Right. So you can't build a system around. So what are you going to do? Restrict the printing of a barcode? Right? It cannot be a login, cannot be about. So those sort of constraints are, you have to, a risk-based awareness, as Jitendra, was speaking out and bringing in that culture, that is key. The other aspect, though, is if you look again, standing on the shoulders, if you look at the computer science field, there is a notion of data validation, not to be confused as our validation, but it's all about the cleansing of the data, ensuring that it's fit for use, right? So that's where you have the edit checks and everything else that can be there at time of collection. So I think there are other elements that we apply risk, and where the controls make sense and we can do, standing on the shoulders of others, do not reinvent the wheel, pull those concepts, and those concepts are already here in many of the systems that we have. We already have a lot of we have referential integrity checks, right? So a lot of this is here and understanding what you have.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. That was a great discussion. So in the interest of time, I'll probably add a couple of questions from the audience. So first one is pertaining to cyber security, and if you take the COVID vaccines, there are reports of cyber attacks. And how can data breach become more critical? How to get over it is one of the questions posed by the audience. So would you like to take? It's an open question. The question is, COVID vaccines are here, but there are reports of cyber attacks. How can data breach become? How can a data breach become more critical? If you take data integrity into consideration, on how do we get over it? Right? Can data integrity help us address the risks of cyber attacks? Is the question.
Data integrity talks, I'll take that on, and it says data integrity talks about data threats, its life cycle, right? Throughout including the archive, including the backup. You go to Annex 11, you'll see discussions of backup and restore. When you're hacked, right? One of the things in data integrity is about securing the data, the physical security included from these sorts of attacks. Well, there's physical as well as cybersecurity attacks that can hurt. Your backup and your restore concepts. If you look at the GLP concepts, that your backup data can be, brought back up, and B, original data, so you must treat them as the same. So you must ensure that you have a process to recover. There have been, hacks that have occurred at organizations that I have been in, and it does come back to, how much, your recovery point objectives, how much data, will you lose, and you have to restore it because you need to have that confidence. So data integrity already covers cradle to grave. Validation was always cradle to grave. Data lifecycle, the other top end in the Gantt document is, cradle to grave as well. So to get over it is the ability, one is to protect yourself, but hackers are always getting better, the ability to recover.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that if I could. So
yeah.
I think it's a really important topic, right? And it's not just because of COVID, because it's, we know pharma is one of the most attractive and targeted segments around cyber attacks. So when we think about that, it's to Ken's point, there's a lot of aspects to consider about the recovery, or can I recover from this event? And that's critical, but also is how can I prevent it in the first place? And so I see a lot of conversations around that. And the truth is, there's been some really large scale, publicly documented, malware attacks and cyber attacks. And for every one of those, there's about 10 or 20 that aren't heavily publicized, but just as impactful. So I think this is also where you need to look at your corporate strategy, right? And where are you deploying your assets? Another instance where, again, industry can work together with technology and figure out the right balance. Most pharma companies aren't going to be able to dedicate the same kind of cybersecurity resources as you would at an Azure or an Amazon, right? So I do see some change in the industry as well as a perception of where is my data secure, right? Is the cloud less secure than my internal infrastructure? And many times that's a false security in terms of my data is safer because it's on my server in my server room versus something on the cloud. And then if you start layering technology providers in between, something like an Amazon and Azure and your internal teams, how are you encrypting the data in transit? How's the data encrypted at rest? How can I ensure that there's dedicated keys that only I can get access to in interpreting that data in either the source or destination? So I think those are the practices that are really important to discuss when we talk about how can I prevent and safeguard my organization, not only to create restore points, but also to make sure that I'm preventing these attacks from the jump.
Okay, great. That's a great response. So probably one last question from the audience. Probably this related to what Mr. Jitendra was mentioning, right? There is also a video. There's a nice video from IBM, I guess, on counterfeit medicine prevention using blockchain as one. And a lot of use cases are there to address how we can detect and avoid counterfeit medicine. So this is a nice question from the person raising is, do the pharma companies have data on fake and counterfeit medicines used for treatment of COVID-19? That's more recent event related, but it's a more generic question. And can we tie that as a good use case for blockchain? Would you?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, this counterfeit is not the problem of because of the COVID. It is coexisting since the inception of the pharmaceuticals. Still, the 30% market belongs to the counterfeit medicines and all globally. And when we talk about the public and government participation or a company B2C business or B2B business, I think blockchain is going to be a great value addition for overcoming these problems, because we see that when you have a traceability from the end consumer or maybe a patient, those who are going to the chemist shop, and from the manufacturer, there is a traceability link in that. So when you establish the traceability from the manufacturer to the consumer, that is something which is very, very important to have the confidence about that we are buying the right medicine from the right manufacturer with the batch number and all the details, which I feel as of now it is existing. But if you look into that, the foolproven technology and blockchain is going to be a great, and there are good case studies where some of the companies have actually started using blockchain for overcoming from this counterfeit issues. So yes, there are proven business cases where this technology will be like a boon for the public.
Okay, thank you. Any quick addition to that, Ken or Mike?
I would abstract it. It's really about serialization. And blockchain is one of the tools that you can use in that serialization. And their efforts of to the person, I think that's where they're going in interest. So if you look at serialization in general, and you look at that how we go throughout the chain and we serialize and we can detect the counterfeit, and there's regulations going up all over the world on that. So I would direct the person to look into that area, and blockchain being one of the tools in that toolkit that can be applied.
Thanks, Ken. Mike, anything else to add on this?
No, I agree with that point. I think that's really the key and I think serialization is a great point to bring up related to that.
Sure. So that was a nice, wonderful 50-minute conversation. So we have about 8 more minutes to go. So probably, would you like to take 2-3 minutes to give your closing comments on the theme for the day? 2 to 3 minutes. So who would like to go first? Mr. Jitendra?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much. This is a wonderful platform to discuss and have a global perspective also about that. So that the theme was the data integrity, and no doubt about that. Without that, nobody can survive. So data integrity, which ensure the trustworthiness, your loyalty, your respect, your everything. Without that, I think no one going to be exist without data integrity. Especially when you look into that the pharmaceutical side, where the directly your life is on risk. So data integrity from the manufacturing point of view, when we talk about that, from the supplier point of view, what is supplies, what internally been tested, what been consumed. So this is something which is, we are talking since ages about the data integrity, but look into that the current situation, the plethora of devices are getting connected, and there is a pressure from the regulators that to go digital. Some of the systems where they are pushing us that you have to go, because to maintain the traceability and the your trial logs and all. Because in manual systems, it is very difficult, hard to believe that somebody can compromise your integrity and all. That is why we get a great push from the regulators that you implement such systems where you cannot compromise any data integrity issues. And that is how we are progressing. But it's not that something which is putting you pressure and then you are going to on a rectification mode or a modification mode. I think it is a need of the hour that we put all the processes and systems to come out from this data integrity issue, because this is a human life, which is something which is very important.
Okay, thank you. Ken, your summary, please. Any?
Sure, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I think it really comes back down to data integrity is a concept that's always existed, right? Since if you look Alcoa, you look at Part 11, it's been there for a very, very long time, and it's really the application of it. I think I like CSA. Everyone knows I'm a CSA person. Because then it's focusing on, you look at Part 11 scope and application. If you really look at that in itself, it's saying like really determine which are the systems which you really need to validate. And what we have done in this industry, we over-validate. We don't differentiate. To Mike's point, we don't apply also a risk-based approach to the systems where we validate. So what we've done is we've created a burden that prevents us from adopting technology that will help us alleviate the issues that Jitendra was raising, right? So if I have systems that I can use automation, I can use programmatic, I have tools. We have people in our industry who will sit there and say, well, I got a tool that can do 100% verification, but I won't use it because I have to go out and qualify that tool. Instead, I'll just look at 10% of the records, 5% with no statistical basis. So CSA kind of breaks away from that, and it really is just clarifying what's already in regulation. You look at Part 11 scope and application. It very clearly, says, identifies which systems have predicate records, which systems require validations. The systems that don't require validations, you test to make sure you can use them, such that we are able to use technology and adapt it such that we eliminate the data. Well, we can't eliminate, we reduce the probability of data integrity issues coming forward. So I'll end with that.
Okay, thanks, Ken. And over to you, Mike. We started with you, so your summary, yeah, please.
Thank you. No, and really great conversation. And I think that there's a couple of points I'd like to end with. Is just it starts with let's do this intelligently. Let's work together. And I think by challenging, by asking questions, by looking at the status quo and seeing if they're relevant. We all know our worlds have changed so dramatically in the last 20 or 30 years. It's incumbent on us to continue to ask why and say, well, can we do something better here? I'd also, like to revisit the point that, data integrity is critical. I think, as we talked about here, in terms of, the business we're in, if data integrity isn't there, we're not in business, right? So we know how important that is. But if we look at how to apply technology and only look at that through the lens of, let me solve my data integrity problem, we're missing the bigger benefit that can come from that, from being able to say, how can I get these therapies to market faster? And I think that the nice outcome there is that they're dovetailed together, right? You don't have to have a separate project. You just have to be aware and cognizant as you go through that decision-making process to get there. But I will say that the thing I was most excited to hear about today was just the focus on people, right? Because this is incumbent on all of us and our leadership to ensure we're creating that culture of continuous improvement, and creating the psychological safety with our teams, that they can understand we can celebrate failure, right? If there's an issue, let's learn from that, and let's make sure we're progressing and moving forward from that. I think when we create a culture of fear, that only goes so far at helping someone prevent making an error. But once the error comes about, right, it's only going to make that a bigger problem for us. So I would just like to call all leadership to make sure they're creating that culture in their organization and that psychological safety. But great conversation. Really enjoyed it today.
Okay, and thanks a lot for all the great panelists, great conversation. So I hope everyone enjoyed the moderations and the discussion we had. So over to you, Pratibha, for closure. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to Mr. Rahman for moderating the session well, and streamlining all the questions to all the panelists, and helping us to come out with a well-rounded discussion on a very important topic like data integrity. I would like to welcome Mr. Karthik Sharma. He's our associate editor of eHealth magazine and eGov magazine. Over to you, Mr. Karthik.
You're on mute.
Please unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Pratibha. And I got the chance to listen to almost half an hour of this last panel discussion. And I really think that this last session, but it is a really interesting session. And I thank Mr. Khalilur Rahman, Global Head of Software Testing, Novartis, for wonderfully chairing this session and moderating really in an interesting way. And I also thank the other panelists. I thank Mr. Ken Shitamoto, Senior Director for IT in Gilead Sciences, if I'm pronouncing it right or not, and Mr. Michael Hampton, Vice President of IDBS. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I thank Mr. Jitendra Mishra for being here and sharing your thoughts. Mr. Jitendra Mishra, Vice President and Group CIO of Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited. So thank you for being here and joining us and sharing your views. It was a really good day, very, very interesting day where we had a lot of great sessions around pharmaceutical industry. And I think we all realized that last year of COVID-19 pandemic had made us gone through transformation, especially the pharmaceutical industry. The demand and supply, it got you have to be very quick in supply. In processes have to be really faster. We have realized, and I think the role of technology becomes more important now after the world has seen COVID-19 pandemic, and for business transformation and for even in the field of packaging, supply chain, everywhere, I think digitalization is the key. And we are very happy that most of the technology heads, technology expert, technology leaders today shared their views. And day one was quite much on technology, but day two is also there tomorrow. The audience, which is in hundreds of numbers, the audience who are watching us, I would like to tell you that day two there'll be more CEOs, MDs, and directors of various divisions of hospital of pharmaceutical industries will be there talking about the various aspects of pharma industry. So I request all of you to join tomorrow also, and it will be interesting day tomorrow as well like this. So I thank our partners. I thank the associations who have been our partner. I thank SAP. I thank IDBS for being a partner and supporting this event. I thank Map My India for being the partner. So Indian Drug Manufacturers Association in India, the Indian Pharmaceutical Association. So I thank all the partners. I thank the team, the team of Elets for working on this summit, and thank you to the speakers and the audience for being here throughout the day in the great number and watching this event on our 3D virtual platform Avatar. So tomorrow also we'll be there, and till then, bye bye. Take care. And can we present the Pratibha? Can we have the presentation ceremony, please?
Yeah, we are felicitating all our speakers with the Pharma Leadership Awards, and we would like to give away the awards to this last panel also. Thanks a lot, Mr. Rahman, for joining
Thank
in and
you.
moderating the session. It was really awesome the way you moderated and you streamlined the questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Ken, Senior Director IT Gilead Sciences. It's a good morning for Mr. Ken. Thanks a lot for joining in from and giving out your time in the morning. Thanks a lot, Mr. Ken.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Jitendra Mishra, VP Group CIO from Alchemic Pharmaceuticals Limited. Thanks a lot, sir, for joining in and giving your views on data integrity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
Thanks a
much.
lot, Mr. Shriji. He had to leave a little bit early from Global CI, the Global CI of Lupin. Thanks a lot for joining in, sir, giving your views. And we would like to extend the speaker certificate to Michael Hampton, the Vice President of IDBS. Thanks a lot, Mr. Michael, for joining in and giving your views as well.
Thank you for including me.
So, in the presence of our partner IDBS, we are very honored to present these awards to these technology leaders in pharmaceutical industry. And we are giving this award just because while inviting the people, the leaders in this event, we have to go to a lot of research and analysis of the people who are contributing to pharmaceutical industry. So we realized that all these major speakers who are talking in our platform have really great and major contribution to this industry. And the only way to felicitate and just a small token of respect and appreciation from our side is to present the Pharma Leadership Award from Elets Technomedia to the leaders like you. So we are fortunate, we are glad, we are honored to present you these awards in the presence of our partner IDBS. So thank you so much for contributing this much to the industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you
an
very
honor.
much. It's an honor.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
stay
Bye-bye.
safe. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye bye.